listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me, non-judgmental talk about infidelity with Dr. Marie Murphy. If you're looking for new perspectives on complicated relationship issues, you've come to the right place.
Days go by, they're crawling by.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Marie Murphy. I'm a relationship coach and I help people who are engaging in anything they think counts as infidelity to deal with their feelings, clarify what they want, and make decisions about what they're going to do. No shame, no blame, no judgments. A lot of the so-called advice out there for people who are cheating on their partners is little more than thinly veiled judgment, but that is not what I provide. I believe you are entitled to guidance and support that respects the fullness of your humanity and the complexity of your situation, no matter what you're doing. When you're ready to resolve your infidelity situation in a way that's truly right for you, I can help you do it. I offer confidential, compassionate coaching via Zoom, which means we can work together no matter where you're located. You can schedule an introductory coaching session with me through my website, mariemurphyphd.com. Together, we will find you some relief and a clear path forward. Okay. On this podcast, we've talked a lot about the kinds of decisions you may find yourself making or wanting to make in relation to your infidelity situation. And we've talked about some of the ways you can approach making decisions related to your infidelity situation. Today, we're going to step back a little bit and talk about why it can be tremendously beneficial to be more decisive and why, in the service of that, you may want to start thinking about yourself as a person who has the capacity to be decisive or more decisive. We're not going to talk about the specifics of making decisions. We're going to talk about choosing to be more decisive as a precursor to making decisions. So let's get clear about what we mean by decisive or decisiveness. Decisive can mean having the ability to make decisions quickly and effectively. It can also mean settling an issue and producing a definite result. So we might say that being decisive entails making decisions quickly or reasonably quickly and efficiently for the sake of settling issues and producing definite results. On top of that, I tend to think about decisiveness as a matter of being willing to make decisions. Or perhaps it's better to say that willingness to make decisions is a prerequisite to being decisive. Now, there are a lot of reasons why being decisive may benefit us. Our time and energy in any given day is limited, after all. And our time alive being is limited, and we don't know how limited. And within our finite time and energy, there are a lot of things we do that prevent us from doing other things or preclude us from doing other things simply because it isn't possible to do certain things simultaneously. For instance, you can't go to the chiropractor and the dentist at the same time. At least I sure hope not. You cannot simultaneously be in Bora Bora and Yosemite. You cannot simultaneously be in a monogamous relationship with one person and in a monogamous relationship with another person. Well, I mean, you can be in relationships with two people at once and say they're both monogamous, but that's usually what we call cheating. And right now, what I mean by that is that technically you cannot fulfill the promise of monogamy to two people at the same time. As many people define monogamy anyway. We could split hairs all day here, but that's not what I'm trying to do. And on top of that, in many places, including the United States, you cannot legally be married to more than one person at once. So our time is limited, our energy is limited, and there are some choices we make in life that once made cut us off, at least temporarily, from experiencing alternatives. Now, these could seem like really great reasons to get good at making decisions and to intentionally cultivate your capacity to be more decisive. And for some people, these are great reasons to be decisive. Some people are like, well, shit, if my time is limited and my attention is limited and my choices matter, I want to make choices that serve me well, and I want to make them as efficiently as I can so that I can be really deliberate about giving my precious time and energy to what I really want to give my precious time and energy to, right? But for other people, being decisive doesn't sound appealing at all. Some of us are very resistant to the idea of being decisive. And there are 3 things I see going on when people are resistant to being decisive. Now, I'm going to tell you what those 3 things are, but I want to make it clear that these are not definitive statements about how all humans are. But they are patterns I've observed within coaching hundreds and hundreds of people who are grappling with their infidelity situations. The first thing that's often going on when people are hesitant to be decisive is that they think there is great value in taking time to think things over. And I mean, this is such a funny one, right? When I said that just now, you probably thought, yeah, isn't there great value in taking time to think things over? Well, I agree that there is great value in taking time to think things over if you are clear on exactly what it is that you are thinking over, exactly what it is that you need to consider or evaluate or assess, and if you are clear on how much time you are willing to spend on thinking things over, right? So often people come to me and tell me that they've been thinking over their infidelity situation and what they might want to do about it for months or even years. And when I ask them what they still need to consider after they've done all of this thinking, they'll tell me that they have no idea. So, dear listeners, I want to suggest that sometimes thinking things over is essentially stalling. Maybe we don't mean it to be stalling, but it ends up being a form of stalling. And this is very similar to what we talked about last week in the episode about recklessness. Some of us have gotten the message that it is virtuous to think important matters through very carefully before making a decision or taking action. I know this is a thing. But there is a big difference between thinking things through deliberately and systematically and entertaining thoughts over and over and over again for no definite purpose and to no definite benefit. This is something that a lot of people get really mixed up about. They lose sight of the possibility that the reason why we think it's important to think things over thoroughly is to arrive at a clear decision. And they start to think that thinking things over is an end or a goal in and of itself, or a win in and of itself, right? In addition to thinking that thinking about things really carefully or thinking about things for a long time has an absolute benefit, a lot of us kind of believe that by thinking about something for a long time, a decision will make itself. Or we think that as a result of all of our thinking, what we want will become so very obvious to us that making a decision will be automatic, or at least it will feel really easy and really straightforward. If that's what you've been thinking, I have liberating news for you. Thinking through your options or thinking about a situation doesn't make a decision. Making a decision makes a decision. Now, the second thing that I see happening a lot when people are resistant to or suspicious of being decisive is that they've grown really attached to the identity of being indecisive, or they've grown attached to indecisiveness being part of who they are and their sense of things. Now, that might sound weird to some of you, but I know that some of you are well aware that this is a thing. A lot of people out there are sure that they are indecisive, and that's just the truth of their being, and are sure that there's nothing they can do about this. And sometimes people come to this conclusion because they've had multiple experiences in life when they've assessed their own behavior and deemed it indecisive. Or maybe somebody told them that they were indecisive. And then maybe that happened again and maybe again. And then they decided, well, I guess I am an indecisive person. I guess that's part of who I am. And they started to make that part of their identity or their sense of who they were or part of their self-concept. Now, it's really important to be aware that we tend to like having a coherent identity, or a lot of us sure do anyway. We like having a consistent, coherent story of who we are and what we are like and what we aren't like. We really like to tell ourselves a story of ourselves that makes sense to us. And if being indecisive is part of who we think we are, we may kind of relish that, or at least we may treat it as an established fact, and we may find comfort or reassurance in having this bit of certainty about ourselves. And from that position, considering the possibility that we could actually be more decisive if we wanted to be, may seem like a threat to who we know ourselves to be. And that can seem like a very bad thing indeed. Sometimes we really just want to know who we are and believe we can be certain about who we are, even if hanging on to some aspects of our identity doesn't help us become more of who we want to be, right? So, in other words, some of us resist the idea of being more decisive because it just seems too foreign to us or too threatening to us. It just seems too familiar or too out of step with our established self-concept. Finally, the third thing I see quite often when people resist being decisive is a fear of missing out, or FOMO, or a fear of FOMO, a fear of feeling FOMO. That might sound like a mouthful, but I'm completely serious. Some people tell me that they can't make a decision because they are afraid if they make a choice, they might feel FOMO in the future. They might not be currently experiencing FOMO, but they're afraid they could. And of course, some people are very currently afraid of missing out if they make a decision, right? There's that too. Maybe they fear missing out on specific things, or maybe they just fear the possibility of missing out on something. Now, these three things that I've just mentioned are not mutually exclusive. Often, people think there is great value in thinking things through really thoroughly without defining what that means, and they think of themselves as indecisive, and they fear what they might miss out on as a result of making a decision. And my theory is that there can be a causal relationship between these things. If we tell ourselves we have to think things through really carefully before we can make a decision, we're not making a decision. And we can see that as evidence that we're indecisive. And when we are not in the habit of making decisions reasonably efficiently and seeing that we don't die as a result of making a decision, usually, the fear of what will happen when we make a decision can loom larger and larger. And thus, we may convince ourselves that we really do need to be concerned about FOMO. Vicious cycles, people. Very vicious cycles. Now, here's the thing. It is true that by making a choice, you will be saying yes to something and no to something else. It is true that by choosing one option or one set of options, you will forego others. But I want to suggest to you that this isn't a problem at all. In fact, it's actually a great thing. Making clear choices about what you are going to devote your time and energy and focus to, and what you will not devote your time and energy and focus to, allows you to concentrate your energies on the things you value and care about and prioritize. Making clear choices allows you to stop dispersing your energy and allows you to stop focusing on things that are less important to you or maybe aren't really important to you at all. And that's a great thing. Although we often fear being decisive because we're afraid we'll make a choice that would potentially not be to our liking, by being indecisive, we are squandering our precious moments in life. So how on earth is that better than making a choice and risking not liking it? If you make a choice you really don't like, you can always choose again. And you stand to learn a lot and refine your sense of what's important to you in the process of choosing and potentially choosing again. Thinking things through indefinitely, on the other hand, does not yield those benefits. Now, before I go any further, let me make something absolutely clear. I say this kind of thing often because it's really important. If you like thinking of yourself as someone who thinks it's really important to think things through very carefully before making a choice, and you like what you are getting out of thinking about yourself that way, then great. If you like thinking of yourself as someone who is really indecisive, and you like what you're getting out of thinking of yourself that way, then that's terrific. If you like using FOMO as a reason to hold off on making decisions, perhaps indefinitely, fine. If you are consciously choosing these ways of being for yourself, I think that is great. The end. But what I see all the time, over and over, day after day, week after week, is that people who think it's just a fact that it's better to think things through for a really long time, or think that it's just a fact that they're indecisive, do not like what they are getting from believing these things are true and then behaving as if these things are true. So, I want to propose a few things that might sound totally radical to you. First, you can consider something thoroughly and carefully without taking forever to do it. You can make decisions in any amount of time you want to. And perhaps more importantly, you can get really good at making decisions that you feel great about pretty quickly. Second, you can start thinking of yourself as a person who has the capacity to be decisive. If you're really attached to the idea that you are, by definition, indecisive, you can explore loosening your grip on that identity gradually. You might be willing to consider the possibility that you aren't always indecisive. You could consider that you have it in you to become more decisive, however incrementally that may happen for you. Or if you want, you can also just decide that you are going to be as decisive as possible from here on out. And by telling yourself that, you've just given yourself evidence that you are right. Third, you can rethink your relationship with FOMO, or to FOMO. For instance, you might decide to believe that even if by making a choice you are missing out on something, you are also gaining the opportunity to fully participate in something else. You can let missing out on whatever you think you're missing out on get less of your focus and allow your enjoyment of whatever it is you've chosen to get more of your focus. Our power to direct our focus is one of the greatest powers we have, so practice using it to your advantage. If you think it's a problem to be missing out on something, it's going to become a problem for you. But on the other hand, if you think about how great it is to be able to devote your attention to whatever it is you've chosen, you're going to be able to enjoy what you've chosen to a much greater degree. Okay, now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to tell you a little story about why more consideration isn't necessarily better than efficient consideration. This story does not have anything to do with infidelity, but it illustrates how we can be more decisive and why it may be really valuable to be more decisive. So earlier this year, my spouse and I remodeled our living space, and my spouse, bless him, did way more of the work on this project than I did. We didn't do any of the actual remodeling work ourselves. We are not those people. But he did do most of the dealing with the contractors and all of that kind of stuff. And this degree of involvement on his part began long before the actual work on our living space started. He was thinking about the planning a lot more than I was, and I was and still am very grateful for everything that he did in this department. But Because I was so appreciative of everything he was doing to prepare for our remodel, I went along with some aspects of his approach that I was deeply skeptical of and not particularly inclined to participate in doing. And of course, I also did this because I love him and appreciate that his approaches to doing things are different from mine at times. And I try to respect his approaches, or at least humor them, at least to an extent, because I think this is important. I appreciate this sort of generosity from him, and I want to extend it to him too, but only to a point. So here's specifically what I'm talking about. Months before the remodel actually started, he would recruit me to go and look at tiles or cabinets or toilets or paint or sinks or appliances or whatever. He'd just want us to go look at stuff. And when we would go look at these things, I'd ask, well, okay, what are we trying to accomplish today? Do you have something specific in mind that you're trying to evaluate or research or compare? And he'd be like, oh, no, we're just looking. And I'd be like, well, what for? And he'd say something like, oh, just to get ideas, or oh, just to see what's out there. And at first I was like, okay, fair enough. But then after a while, I was like, what are we actually accomplishing on these missions? And his answer initially was that we were getting ideas. And I was open to that for about a minute before deciding that the answer to the question of what we were actually accomplishing on these missions was actually nothing. We were not getting anything out of just looking at stuff for the remodel. And so, after what I considered to be more than enough of this just looking approach or non-approach, I said, I am not going back to any of these stores until we are ready to make decisions. And when we go back, we will make our decisions during that visit to each store or each vendor unless we have a super compelling reason not to. And so that's what we did. We committed to making decisions quickly and efficiently, and we did. That doesn't mean we made decisions haphazardly. We didn't. We just didn't drag out the decision-making process beyond what was absolutely necessary for our purposes. Instead of endlessly wondering what questions we should be asking ourselves about the various things we needed to buy, we asked people what questions we should be considering before we made a purchase. We asked people who knew about these things and had experience and had been through this a million times already. We asked for recommendations from people with specialized knowledge. We sought out guidance from our contractor, and we did all of these things with the goal of making suitable choices efficiently rather than allowing any or every decision to become an endless time suck. But any of the decisions that we made could very easily have become endless time sucks. We could have gotten sucked into reading every single review that had ever been posted online about, say, particular appliances or particular brands of paint, or this wood versus that wood versus this artificial substance or that artificial substance for flooring. We could have switched our criteria for making decisions every other day. We could have gotten lost for months in the various different shades of white paint that are on the market today. Do you know how many shades of white paint are available for sale today? I don't know what the exact number is. I have no idea what the exact number is, but I will tell you, it's more than a handful. It's more than a few. But ultimately, my priority was to pick out a shade of white paint and pick out so many other things that I was going to be reasonably happy with to the best of my estimation at the decision-making stage, and to do it as efficiently as possible so that I didn't have to spend any more of my life thinking about white paint than I absolutely had to, or toilets, or countertops, or all the other things that we had to make decisions about. The goal, after all, wasn't to turn the remodel into an endless project or a major time and energy suck. The project took long enough, even though it wasn't endless. And it took up plenty of time and energy, even though I tried to be pretty ruthless about not letting it take up too much time and energy. The goal was to get the remodel done as soon as was reasonably possible and to get it done well. Not necessarily perfectly, but well enough. Now, this might sound really obvious, but it's important to point out. The goal was not to keep the remodel going for an indefinite amount of time. And in order to meet our goals, and in order to avoid the fate that we wanted to avoid, we had to make a lot of decisions, and we had to make them efficiently. I want to suggest that something very similar is true of your infidelity situation. You probably want to bring your situation to some kind of a resolution. And I know you may think that in order to get there, you have to think things through really carefully. But even if you believe that, what you probably ultimately want is to stop thinking things through and actually make some decisions and move forward, right? Isn't that what you want? If that isn't what you want, that's okay. If what you want is to not resolve your infidelity situation, but rather to have it as a source of unending confusion and drama in your life, that's your prerogative. If you want to choose that, I will love you all the same. But as always, my exhortation is that you make that choice as consciously as you possibly can, right? But my guess is that you probably don't want to stay in a loop of thinking about your infidelity situation without actually making any choices or making any changes forever. My guess is that you don't want to let your infidelity situation and wondering what you should do about it dominate your life forever. Why would you? That's kind of like saying you'd rather have your remodel continue forever instead of ultimately having your remodel finished so that you can live in your home in peace. Right? With your infidelity situation, you've got other things to do instead of dealing with it all the time. You probably want to get busy enjoying your love life instead of dealing with difficulties within your love life. You probably want your love life to take up a certain amount of bandwidth because it deserves it, but not all of your bandwidth because you've got other important things to do. So, if you want to get somewhere different, if you want to finish your remodel, so to speak, if you want to resolve your infidelity situation, if you want to be somewhere other than where you currently are in relation to your infidelity situation, the way forward is to make decisions. Now, sometimes my clients ask me if everyone has as hard of a time deciding what they want to do about their infidelity situation and then actually acting on their decisions as they do. And when clients ask me this question, I always hesitate to answer it for two reasons. One is, when you're dealing with a situation in your life that you find challenging, it doesn't really matter if other people find that situation less challenging than you do. What matters is you allowing yourself to be where you are and you being willing to work with yourself as you are. And the other reason is that whether something is easy or hard or anywhere in between is always a matter of our thinking. But that said, I will tell you that my observation is that some folks do have a quote unquote easier time dealing with their infidelity situation than others. And when I say this, I do not mean that these folks would tell you that dealing with their infidelity situation was easy. But some people do grapple with their challenges more efficiently than others and with less total suffering. And as you may have guessed, given what we're talking about today, the general difference is that folks who are willing to be decisive tend to have an easier time dealing with their situation efficiently, and folks who are reluctant to be decisive or are resistant to being decisive tend to have a harder time dealing with their situation efficiently. In general, folks who have an easier time dealing with their infidelity situations believe in their capacity to make decisions and believe in the benefit of making decisions. And folks who have a harder time dealing with their infidelity situations tend to question their ability to make decisions and also tend to doubt the value of making decisions. What I want to suggest is that you can be more decisive if you want to be. Even if you haven't thought of yourself as a decisive person in the past, you can start to think of yourself as a decisive person or as a person who has the capacity to be decisive starting right now. And to echo what I said earlier, I want to suggest that the first step in being more decisive is deciding that you can be more decisive. Because, as good old Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, either way, you are right. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, how can I be more decisive if I don't know how to be more decisive? And this is a fair question. A lot of us don't have great processes in place for making decisions and don't know how to manage our monkey minds when they act up and get in the way of us making decisions. But what I want you to consider for today is that all of the decision-making tactics or techniques in the world aren't going to be fully useful to you unless you believe that you have it in you to make decisions and believe that there's value in making decisions. When we are willing to be decisive, it becomes easier to be decisive and to make decisions efficiently. When we believe there is value in being decisive, it becomes a lot easier to make decisions efficiently. If you are committed to believing that you are indecisive or committed to believing that there's something to be gained from endlessly thinking things through or something to be gained from leaning into your FOMO, none of the decision-making techniques in the world are going to get you very far. So what I encourage you to do today is think about what you get out of making decisions quickly and or efficiently. And don't you try to tell me that you don't ever make decisions quickly or efficiently. I am sure you do. I am willing to bet a lot of money that you brushed your teeth this morning. And if you didn't, I'm willing to bet that you brushed your teeth at least once yesterday. I'm also willing to bet that if you've left your home today, you put clothes on before you did so. How long did it take you to make those decisions? How long did it take you to decide if you were going to brush your teeth or not? How long did it take you to decide whether or not you were going to put clothes on before you left your home? Probably not very long. So, start to think about all of the times when you've made decisions quickly or efficiently or both. What have you gotten out of making decisions in this manner? What are the benefits you have experienced when you've made decisions in this manner? Have there been any drawbacks to making decisions quickly or efficiently? If there have been, what are they? And have the benefits of making decisions quickly and efficiently outweigh the drawbacks? If so, how? And if not, how? Now, I also want you to think about times when you have not made decisions quickly or efficiently. Have you gotten anything that you liked out of making decisions slowly and efficiently? You may have, it's possible. And if you have, that's important to be aware of. If you do note that you've liked something that you've gotten out of making decisions slowly and efficiently, ask yourself exactly what it was and exactly why you liked it. The point is just to get clear on what's working for you and what isn't. And then, of course, ask yourself if there were any drawbacks to making decisions slowly and efficiently. Once you've identified what those are, if there are any, ask yourself how they stack up to the benefits, right? The decisions we make and the way that we make them have a tremendous impact on our experience of life and quite often our quality of life, the extent to which we're enjoying our lives, the extent to which we feel like we have power in our lives or agency in our lives. So gaining awareness of how you relate to decisions and potentially deciding to relate to making decisions in a different way can be some of the best things you ever do for yourself. And they're definitely two of the most valuable things you can do if you want to make changes in your infidelity situation. And to that effect, if you would like my help making decisions in relation to your infidelity situation, I'm here for you. Let's work together. Your power lies in your willingness to make choices. And I'm here to help you cultivate your willingness to make choices. And with that, your power to live the love life that you most want to live. And why would you want to fritter away any more of your precious time doing anything other than living out the love life that you most want to live, right? When you're ready to get to work, you can schedule an introductory coaching session with me through my website, mariemurphyphd.com. I can't wait to meet you. And you can also learn about the coaching packages I currently offer new clients beyond that initial session on the services page of my website. All right, everyone, that is it for today. Thank you all so much for listening. Have a great week. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me with Dr. Marie Murphy. Make sure to click subscribe to get updates on our latest episodes.